Sansa stood frozen in the great hall of the Red Keep, her hands trembling as King Joffrey's laughter echoed off the stone walls. Her father's blood hadn't yet dried on the executioner's blade, and already the boy king was smirking, flaunting his cruelty like a crown of iron. She had been foolish to dream of songs of love, of courtly kisses, foolish to think Joffrey had a heart beneath that golden mane and smug grin. That day, something inside Sansa Stark shattered, and in its place, something new was born. Not grief, not fear, not even hate, purpose, she smiled, just slightly, just enough for the Queen Mother to believe she was learning obedience. But in her mind, she made a promise to her dead father and to the gods who had failed him. I will not die here. I will not break. I will bury them all in their own lies. The game had begun. The next morning, Sansa walked the castle corridors like a ghost, every eye on her, every whisper about her mad father. She kept her head bowed, her tone gentle, but behind her courtesy was calculation. She began to observe how the guards changed at night, how the servants spoke when no nobles listened, and how Joffrey, though cruel, was still a child. An arrogant, impulsive, predictable child. In the Queen's court, she watched Cersei sip wine and manipulate lords with smiles. Sansa mimicked her, learned from her. She took to Lady Olenna when they met, listening to how the old woman sharpened her words like blades, how she pried truths without ever asking a question directly. Sansa learned that silence often said more than speech, but most of all she watched Joffrey. She learned what made him angry, what made him insecure, what made him jealous. She praised Robb publicly, subtly comparing him to the cowardice of the southern lords. Joffrey struck her for it. She expected that, but she saw the twitch in his eye. He hated not being the hero, not being admired. It made him reckless. One day, Ser Dontos stumbled drunk into the throne room. The crowd laughed as Joffrey poured wine on him and mocked his knighthood. Sansa stepped forward, her voice soft but confident. A king shows mercy. It is said King Baelor the Blessed once. The court grew silent. Cersei tensed. But Joffrey preened. He relented. Allowed Ser Dontos to live, humiliated but breathing. And in that moment, Sansa knew her plan could work. She began nurturing allies. Small ones. Forgotten ones. The kitchen girl who hated Cersei for beating her. The scribe boy who copied Raven messages. The guardsman who once served House Tully. She offered them nothing but kind words and remembrance. But she planted seeds. And she began writing letters. Tiny, hidden letters. To her aunt in the Vale, to Robb, to anyone who might answer. But it was Littlefinger who answered first. In the shadows of the Godswood, he appeared like a whisper. His eyes twinkled with ambition. "You remind me of your mother," he said. "But you're colder, aren't you?" Sansa didn't smile. "I'm smarter," she replied. He liked that, and with him she forged a secret alliance. But she warned him, "Help me bring down Joffrey and then we'll talk. Until then, you're just another player. I'm not a piece to be moved." Joffrey continued his reign of madness, but the whispers began. Whispers of a poison, whispers of Tyrell plots, whispers of Sansa's beauty and her northern blood, fertile ground for rebellion. When Margaery arrived, Sansa played the perfect friend. She confided in her, warned her, gently sowed doubts. "He'll never love you," she said one night. "He can't, he doesn't know what love is, only power." The night before Joffrey's wedding, Sansa met Ser Dontos in the Black Garden. She handed him a vial. "Just a few drops in the wine," she whispered. "Let the lion choke on his own roar." Dontos's hands trembled, but he took it. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. She looked toward the throne room's lights. "Because he smiled when my father died, and I want to see how wide he can smile when the poison reaches his lungs." The bells of King's Landing rang with joy on the day of Joffrey Baratheon's wedding. But to Sansa Stark, every chime sounded like a funeral toll. The sun hung low behind the Red Keep, gilding the towers in blood-orange light. It was a day meant for celebration, for pageantry and wine-soaked flattery. But for Sansa, it was a reckoning. She wore lavender silk, her hair braided in the northern fashion, but she didn't smile. Not truly. Not the way Margaery did, all charm and rose petals. Sansa's smile was a veil stretched over a storm. Her hands were steady, her eyes alert. She sat beside Olenna Tyrell at the feast, sipping slowly, pretending to be the quiet, grieving girl everyone believed her to be, except Littlefinger. He wasn't present at the wedding, but she knew he was watching from the shadows somewhere, or had someone watching for him. He'd made arrangements, moved his pieces. She had made hers. And now the last piece stood Joffrey. Drunk on power, surrounded by sycophants, he raised his cup over and over again. Wine stained his lips purple. He jeered at Tyrion, mocked his uncle with a play about dwarves killing wolves. The crowd laughed because the king laughed, but Sansa could see the shame and anger beneath it all. "He's gotten worse," Olenna whispered, watching Joffrey with unreadable eyes. "He's not fit to rule over a chicken coop, let alone 7 kingdoms. Sansa nodded slightly. "Even chickens would rebel," she said. Olenna laughed, but Sansa's eyes didn't move from Joffrey. Then came the pie, the absurd, towering pigeon pie. Joffrey cut it with widow's wail, letting the poor birds flutter out in panic, wings broken, beaks bloodied. And then he took a bite. It was a single moment, a pause between a laugh and a cough. He staggered. Everyone thought he was pretending. Then came the wheezing, the retching, the crimson streak that leaked from his nose. His fingers clawed at his throat as he toppled forward, knocking goblets and gold plates off the table. Margaery screamed. Cersei rushed forward. Tyrion stood frozen. And Sansa just watched. Not in horror, not in joy, but with cold detachment. The way a general watches a battle unfold exactly as planned. The hall descended into chaos. Guards scrambled. Cersei wailed like a wounded lioness. Maesters ran forward, but it was too late. The boy king writhed on the floor, choking on his own blood, his eyes bulging like a gutted fish. People shouted for help, for answers, for vengeance. And in the madness, Sansa slipped away. Zadontos found her behind the kitchens, where smoke from the roasting pits hid them in a haze. "You must come now," he hissed, his breath stinking of wine. "The queen will blame you. You must leave." Sansa didn't hesitate. She had her cloak hidden behind a stack of flour sacks. She pulled it on, tightened the hood, and followed Dontos through the dark corridors only servants knew. She didn't look back. She didn't mourn. Joffrey was dead. But revenge was not complete, not yet. They met Littlefinger at the edge of Blackwater Bay, on a small ship rocking in the moonlight. Zadontos was smug, proud of his part. He was still talking when the crossbow bolt pierced his throat. Sansa didn't flinch. She simply watched him die and turned to Littlefinger. "That wasn't part of the plan," she said quietly. Littlefinger wiped his hands. "Plans evolve, my lady. Dead men tell no tales." She stared at him for a long time. "Just remember," she said softly, "I'm not your mother. I won't love you. I won't forgive you. And I will never belong to you." Littlefinger smiled, but his eyes flickered with something else, respect perhaps, or fear, "As you wish," he murmured. As the ship pulled away from King's Landing, the city lights flickered like dying stars on the black water. Sansa sat at the stern watching them fade. She had killed a king, a cruel boy who thought her pain was entertainment, and yet her heart felt nothing. Not peace, not triumph, just the hunger for more. Because Joffrey had been the sword, but others had guided his hand, Cersei, the Lannisters, even the fools who stood by and did nothing. They would all answer for it, and Sansa Stark, once a flower wilting in the southern sun, had become something else entirely. Winter was coming for them all. The Vale of Arryn was nothing like King's Landing. It was colder, quieter, and steeped in secrets. Its people whispered instead of shouting. They judged behind veils and smiles. But for Sansa Stark, now disguised as Elaine Stone, Littlefinger's bastard daughter, it was the perfect place to disappear. And Blan, Petyr Baelish had told her she was safe here, that she could start anew, rebuild. But Sansa knew better. She hadn't escaped to live quietly in the mountains. She had fled to build something sharper than a blade, influence. Lady Lysa Arryn welcomed her with a feverish embrace and frantic devotion, clinging to her like a lifeline. There was something broken in her, a madness that flickered behind her wide, staring eyes. Sansa saw it, feared it, and played along. She called her aunt, smiled when told to, wept when demanded. It wasn't difficult. Pretending had become second nature, but she watched everything, listened to every whispered insult about Catelyn, every threat Lisa made toward servants, every scream that echoed behind the doors when Peter denied her something she wanted, and she waited. Sansa began to shape her image as Elaine. She walked among the castle folk, gentle and kind, asking about their children, listening to their problems. She offered small kindnesses that would one day become loyalties. They called her the Quiet Rose, but that was fine. No one fears a rose until it has thorns. Meanwhile, Lysa's possessiveness of Petter grew unbearable. She watched them with wide, paranoid eyes, clinging to him like a drowning woman. Sansa felt the storm building. Then it happened. Lysa caught Peter kissing Sansa in the garden. It had not been Sansa's doing. Baelish had leaned in, smug and slick. She had been caught off guard, but only briefly. She knew how to play the game now. She let the kiss land, and Lysa lost what little grip she had on reality. She dragged Sansa to the moon door that night, shrieking, her fingers tight around her niece's wrist. "You think you can take him from me? You little whore, just like your mother." The wind howled outside the open hole in the floor. The sky yawned beyond it, black and endless. Sansa didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked into Lysa's wild eyes and said quietly, "You think you love him. Petter Baelish doesn't love anyone. Not you, not my mother. He only loves power." The words struck like ice. Lysa faltered. And then Peter appeared. Soft words, gentle lies, promises, then a shove. And Lady Lysa flew. After her death, Peter spun a story of suicide, of fragile madness and sorrow. The Lords of the Vale, wary of him, looked to Sansa, Elaine, with suspicion. But she had prepared for this. She told them tales of her aunt's grief, of the kindness she tried to offer, of her own fear. And she did it with tears that looked genuine, because the truth was she had been afraid. Not of Lysa, of what she herself was becoming. The Lords believed her. Sansa Stark's lie had been accepted. And in that lie she earned a foothold. Time passed. Petter grew closer, more calculating, more controlling. He spoke of marriage, of ruling the North together, of bringing her back as Wardeness of Winterfell. But Sansa had her own thoughts now. She would return to Winterfell, yes, but not as a puppet, not as Littlefinger's bride. She would return as its queen. And so she began to poison his plans from within. She sowed doubt among the Vale Lords, planting seeds that Petter was too ambitious, too secretive. She built quiet alliances with men who missed Jon Arryn's order, who remembered the Starks with respect. She reminded them who she truly was, not Elaine Stone. "I am Sansa Stark, daughter of Eddard and Catelyn. The blood of the North runs in my veins," and they began to listen. When word came that the Boltons had taken Winterfell, that they ruled the North with blood and terror, the Lords muttered of rebellion. And Sansa whispered, "Send me back. Send the rightful heir. Let me take back my home." Petter tried to block it, tried to manipulate her, but the Vale Lords pushed him aside. And Sansa saw it in his eyes, the first flicker of fear. He was losing her. As she rode out of the Vale, cloaked in silver and grey, the banners behind her bore the sigil of House Arryn and the old words of House Stark. She was no longer a pawn, no longer a frightened girl. She had killed a king, buried an aunt, outplayed Littlefinger, and now she was coming home, not to survive but to reclaim. And this time, it wouldn't be love that guided her. It would be vengeance. Winterfell would rise again, and the North would remember. The wind that greeted Sansa as she crossed into the North was cruel, biting, and familiar. It stung her cheeks and howled through the hills like the ghosts of her dead kin. But she didn't flinch. She welcomed the cold like an old friend because it reminded her of who she was and what had been taken from her. The snow-covered fields stretched endlessly, littered with burned farms and butchered villages. Everywhere she looked, she saw the aftermath of Bolton rule. Terror branded into the land. She travelled with only a small escort of Vale knights, led by Sir Lyn Corbray, but they wore their armour proud, not for war, for a message. The North is not forgotten. The true-born daughter of Winterfell returns. They reached Molestown first, a pitiful place full of hollow-eyed folk. She walked among them, unguarded, cloaked in grey and white. People stared at her with disbelief, then awe. "Is it really her?" they whispered. "She looks like Lady Catelyn." "No, like Ned Stark's ghost in a dress." When she entered the inn, silence fell. She stood before the hearth, removed her hood, and spoke plainly. "My name is Sansa Stark. I was stolen from my home, lied to, beaten, and made to bow. But I never forgot where I came from, and I'm here to take it back." No rousing speech, no grand theatrics, just truth delivered with steel in her voice. And the North remembered. By the time she reached White Harbor, the Manderleys were waiting. Wyman Manderley was older, heavier, but sharper than ever. He greeted her with wet eyes and shaking hands. "I feared all the wolves were gone," he said. "But here you stand, milady." "They tried to bury us," Sansa said softly. "But they forgot we were seeds." He pledged his support that same night. She met with every bannerman who'd once knelt to her father. Some were broken men. Some had bent the knee to the Boltons out of fear. But when they saw her, dignified, strong, carrying her family's name like a sword, they bent the knee again, this time with tears and oaths of vengeance. Still there were whispers. "She's changed. Too cold, too cunning. She's been in the South too long." Let them whisper. The Sansa they remembered was dead. In her place stood a Stark, reborn in fire and betrayal. The march to Winterfell was slow, deliberate. Every house that joined her swelled her numbers. Small folk offered bread and stew. Blacksmiths sharpened blades. Old maids wept at the sight of her and called her Lady of the North. But Winterfell had become a nightmare. Under Ramsay Bolton, the castle was no longer a home but a hunting ground. Sansa had heard the stories. Flayed corpses, starving dogs, and a boy parading as her brother. "Reek," she had whispered when she first heard the name. She remembered Theon Greyjoy, arrogant, foolish, and now shattered. She didn't hate him, not anymore. He was just another piece broken by the Boltons, like the North itself. But now she would put the pieces back by force. They arrived at the ridgeline above Winterfell, just as the first snowstorm rolled in. The walls loomed in the distance, black and grey against the white. Sansa sat on her horse, staring down at her childhood home. Her breath came out in clouds. Sir Lyn asked if she wanted to wait for more men, for spring, for better odds. She shook her head. "Spring won't change what they've done, and the longer we wait, the more innocents they burn. This isn't about odds. This is about ending a sickness." That night she wrote a letter to Ramsay Bolton. It read, "You have something that doesn't belong to you, my home, my name, and my justice. I will have all three back. When the wolves howl at your gates, know that winter has come for you." She signed it with her full name. "Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell." The next morning they delivered the letter with a black arrow. She knew Ramsay would laugh, that he would mock her, underestimate her. She was counting on it, because while he prepared for battle, she was already inside his walls. Her agents, cooks, stable boys, scullery maids, had been slipping into Winterfell for weeks, whispering, undermining, poisoning. Ramsay controlled the dogs, but she had the rats, and they had already begun to chew. That night, as snow blanketed the world, Sansa stood in her tent, staring at a map of her home. Peter Baelish approached, smug as ever. "You've done well," he said. "The people love you. The North kneels for you. Soon all you need is to marry me, and—" She turned to him, her voice calm. "If you finish that sentence, I will have your tongue sent to your whorehouse in a box." He froze, blinking. Sansa stepped closer, her voice a whisper of frost. "You helped me once, and I thanked you. But make no mistake, Peter, I will not trade one master for another. This is my war, and when I take Winterfell, it will be without you at my side or above me. It will be with your shadow behind me." And for the first time, Baelish had no clever reply. The battle was near, and this time the little dove wasn't caged. She was soaring, teeth bared, wings sharp, and blood was about to fall like snow. The snow fell heavy the morning the siege began. Winterfell loomed ahead like a corpse in a crown, its grey towers buried beneath layers of snow and time. From her vantage point on the hill, Sansa watched smoke curl from its chimneys. It was still warm inside, still alive, but that warmth was fed by blood, not fire. Innocents, servants, prisoners, everyone who had survived the flaying knives and Ramsay's games. That ends today. She turned from the ridge and addressed the gathered northern lords. The banners flapped in the wind. Manderley, Glover, Serwyn, Tallheart. She saw worn faces, tired from too many betrayals and too many false kings. But they looked to her now, not as a girl, not as a lady, but as a Stark. "I will not give you a speech," she said. "You all know what he's done. To your sons, to your wives, to your bannermen. You came here to fight, not for me, but for the right to sleep again, without screams echoing in your heads." A murmur of agreement passed through the ranks. She let her voice grow cold. "We do not march today as rebels. We do not march as Vale men or hill clans or broken houses. We march as wolves, and wolves do not beg. Wolves do not kneel. We take what is ours, and we do not stop until we are the only ones left standing." The cheer that followed wasn't loud. It was fierce, like a growl. The first assault was meant to provoke. Her soldiers didn't breach the walls. They didn't have to. They lit the tree line behind the kennels, smoked out the hounds. Then they catapulted barrels of burning pitch against the walls. Not enough to cause damage, just enough to send a message. Inside the castle, Ramsay watched from the battlements, with that permanent sneer frozen on his face. He looked amused, like a boy given a new toy to break. Sansa wanted that look to be the last expression he ever wore. The next day she sent another raven. "Return my brother, return my home, or I will take them both over your bones." Ramsay replied by flinging a head over the walls. It wasn't Rickon's, not this time, but it was a message. Sansa didn't blink when it landed near her horse. She simply nodded to Ser Lyn. "Begin the next phase." By dusk, the first cracks had begun. Her spies inside Winterfell, small folk mostly, once beaten, once silenced, had begun their work. Doors unlocked, horses set loose, guards misled, rations poisoned, rumors spread. Fear had begun to turn inward. Ramsay responded the only way he knew how: punishment. He had 6 men flayed alive in the courtyard and left them hanging from the gate. But the effect backfired. Some of his own soldiers fled in the night. Some whispered of ghosts, of old Stark vengeance. Some began to doubt him. Sansa had seen it before, the way tyrants lose their grip. Not all at once, but inch by inch. That night, she crept to the edge of the encampment and stood alone in the snow. Her breath formed clouds, and from behind her Petter approached. "You've come far, my lady," he said. She didn't turn. "I'm not your lady," he exhaled sharply. "This is your chance. Strike quickly. I've seen you lead, but you still hesitate." Sansa turned now, slowly, eyes meeting his with a hard calm. "I don't hesitate. I choose my moment." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You taught me that. You taught me how to wait until my enemies are blind with arrogance. Then crush them while they're laughing." She leaned closer. "Just remember, one day I'll choose my moment for you." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Winter has made you cruel." "No," she said. "Men made me cruel. Winter just sharpened it." At dawn, the walls cracked. Not from siege ladders or fire, but from within. 2 gates opened, quietly, sloppily. Inside the castle, chaos had begun. Some of Ramsay's men had turned, others fled. And Sansa's scouts, waiting just beyond the trees, moved fast. By midday, the battle was on. The courtyard of Winterfell turned red with snow and blood. Swords clashed. Men screamed. Ramsay's forces fought like cornered dogs, vicious, desperate, wild. Sansa stayed at the rear, watching everything. Every move, every failure. She didn't charge. She didn't fight. She commanded. She was calm, icy, deliberate, and when the dust began to settle, when Ramsay's archers had been pushed into the kennels and his soldiers dragged from the towers, she gave the final order. No mercy. Ramsay was captured, of course, beaten, bloodied, but alive. He smiled at her through cracked lips when they dragged him before her in chains. "Hello, little dove," he rasped. "You finally came home." She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She simply nodded. And the guards dragged him to the dungeons. She would deal with him last. Because vengeance, when it is earned, should be savored. That night, Sansa walked the ruined halls of Winterfell. The snow fell through the broken roof. The walls were cracked. The rooms empty, but it was home. And tomorrow she would sit in the high seat of her father and claim it as hers. Not by marriage, not by mercy, by fire and blood. And though her name was still whispered with fear in the south, here in the north, they called her Wolfsbane, the beautiful poison that killed a kingdom. The sky over Winterfell the next morning was a quiet grey, heavy with snow but still, like the breath before a scream. The storm had passed, but it left behind silence. Not peace, just the kind of stillness that settles after something terrible has ended and something colder is about to begin. Sansa stood at the top of the steps in the great hall. The long tables had been cleared. The high seat of House Stark was once more draped in grey and white, the direwolf of the north hanging proudly behind her. The stones beneath her boots remembered her father, her brothers, and now her. She wore black. No flowers, no fur, just a simple dress unadorned but strong. Her hair was braided like her mother's, but her eyes were colder than either of her parents ever were. The hall was full. Manderley, Glover, Hornwood, Serwyn, the clans of the mountain. Even the lords, who once bent the knee to the Boltons, now stood in silence, watching her. She raised her voice. "You came here for justice, for truth, for vengeance, and you earned it. Not by fire, not by dragons, not by southern gold, but by remembering who you are." Her hand rested on the hilt of the sword at her side. Ice reborn, not her father's great sword, but a new blade, forged in the Vale, named Ghost of the North. "I do not come to rule you as a queen of thrones and coins. I come as a Stark, and the North will never be ruled by fear again." The hall thundered. "The North remembers. Long live the Lady of Winterfell." But Sansa didn't smile, not yet. That night she visited the dungeons. No guards, no ceremony. Just her and Ramsay Bolton, chained and kneeling in the dark, stripped of his name, his title, his smirk. His face was bruised, his mouth dry. But when she entered, he tried to sneer. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd want to see me like this. Makes you feel powerful, doesn't it?" Sansa said nothing. She circled him slowly. "You think you've won?" he continued, voice cracking. "You think you're better than me. But you became me. You used poison, whispers, knives in the dark. You flayed me with politics. You think that makes you strong?" Sansa crouched in front of him. "No," she whispered. "It makes me free." He laughed, crooked, broken. "What now? You going to kill me yourself? Slit my throat like a butcher's daughter?" She tilted her head. "No," she stood. "I'm going to give you to someone you hurt more than you ever hurt me." And then she stepped aside as a small, shadowed figure entered the cell. Theon Greyjoy. Sansa didn't stay to watch what happened. She heard nothing. No screams, no begging, just the quiet sound of the door closing. She walked through the crypts of Winterfell alone, tracing her fingers over the names etched into the stone. Eddard, Catelyn, Robb, Rickon, Brandon, Lyanna. She whispered their names one by one like a prayer. "I've come home," she said. And for a brief moment, she let herself cry, just once. Over the following weeks, Sansa began to rule. She listened to her people, not from a throne, but walking among them. She repaired, rebuilt, shared bread with the hungry. Punished corruption swiftly. They called her the Quiet Wolf. She sent messages to the south, not as a plea, but as a warning. Winterfell is no longer yours to threaten. The north stands alone. Touch it again, and we will remind you why even the dragons once feared the snow. She did not respond to letters from Cersei. She burned them. She did not answer Pater's subtle requests for favor. She ignored them. The game had changed, and Sansa was no longer a piece. She was the one flipping the board. But power came with a cost. Not all wounds were healed. Arya had not returned. Jon had vanished beyond the wall. Bran had changed into something she no longer recognized. She ruled a kingdom of ghosts. And sometimes in the deep hours of the night, she would stare out from the battlements, wondering if she had lost more than she'd gained. If the cost of vengeance was too high. But every time she felt the doubt creep in, she would remember Joffrey's laughter, Ramsay's smirk, Cersei's lies. And she would remind herself, mercy is for people who never had to earn their survival in blood. And so the North thrived again, not under a gentle queen, but under a woman who had been broken, buried, and forgotten, and who rose from the ashes of southern lies, wearing the cold like armor. Sansa Stark no longer waited to be saved. She became the storm. Spring arrived late in the north, timid and shy, as if unsure it was welcome. The snow melted slowly from the courtyards of Winterfell, revealing stones soaked in history and blood. Crops began to take root again. Fires burned longer. Laughter returned, quiet, cautious, but it was there. And yet Sansa Stark remained unchanged. She still wore black. She still walked the halls before dawn, silent as a ghost. And her dreams? They were never warm. She spent most of her mornings at the war table, poring over ravens from distant lords. Dawn stirred. The riverlands seethed, and whispers of Daenerys Targaryen's dragons burned across the south like sparks seeking dry wood. But the north stayed firm, her bannermen loyal, her people proud. Still, one letter made her hand freeze mid-scroll. It came not from an enemy, but from the wall. It was written in a familiar hand, shaky but still carrying the weight of the wolf. Jon. He was alive. Alive and changed. A letter of few words, but full of meaning. The dead are stirring. The wall is not enough. I go where I must. Do not follow. Do not wait. Be strong. No promise to return. No farewell. Just a command. Sansa read it 100 times, and then she burned it. Because even if Jon was still breathing, he was no longer hers to protect or save. 2 days later, Peter Baelish returned to Winterfell. Uninvited, he came cloaked in courtesy, speaking of new alliances, of southern tides rising, of how dangerous it was for the North to stand alone. "You've done beautifully," he told her, standing in her solar as if he owned it. "But wolves are not meant to rule alone. You need a partner, a husband, someone who understands power the way you do." Sansa studied him the way one studies a viper. "You mean someone like you?" He smiled. "I mean exactly me." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then she stood slowly, walked past him to pour herself wine. She didn't offer him any. "I once believed in fairy tales," she said softly, "that a gallant prince would save me. Then I believed in monsters, that they would eat me alive." She turned now, eyes sharp as glass. "But the truth is simpler. Men like you don't believe in saving anyone but yourselves. You only love what you can use. My mother, my pain, my name." Petter stepped closer, voice lowering. "You misjudge me. I've protected you." "No," she interrupted, voice flat. "You traded me. You sold me to Ramsay. You knew what he was?" He froze. She stepped closer, each word colder than the last. "You saw me as a ladder rung, not a girl, not a Stark. You wanted me broken enough to need you. But I don't need you." "I never did." She nodded to the guards outside the door. "Escort Lord Baelish to the gates. He is no longer welcome in the north." He tried to protest, to scheme, to smile his way out. But the look in her eyes stopped him cold. It wasn't rage or sorrow. It was detachment, like a queen watching a thief be hanged. And that terrified him more than fury ever could. That night, she walked alone through the godswood, where snow still clung to the branches, and the heart tree's face wept red tears. She sat beneath it, back against its ancient bark, and let the silence settle over her. She didn't cry. She never cried anymore. But she whispered a name, Mother, and then another, Father, and then she whispered her own. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Queen of Nothing, but still standing. She closed her eyes and let the wind sing through the trees like the voices of her dead. In the weeks that followed, she turned inward, focused on rebuilding, not ruling. She established new courts, staffed by women who had suffered in silence during the wars, widows, mothers, girls who once knew only fear. She trained them not to obey, but to lead. They called it the Silent Council, and they ruled with her, quietly, ruthlessly, justly. The South scoffed at the idea. But the North thrived. One day, a raven arrived bearing unexpected news. Arya, alive, returning. Sansa read the words once, then dropped the scroll as if it burned. She had imagined her sister 100 ways, bloody, wild, lost, but never found. The girl she remembered had been fierce, but the woman coming back? Sansa didn't know who she would be. All she knew was that ghosts were gathering. The North was no longer a grave. It was becoming something else. A kingdom of survivors, a vengeance of wolves. As she stood once again on the battlements, watching a single rider approach on a pale horse across the snowy field, Sansa felt something stir deep in her chest. Not fear, not hope, just the cold recognition that the past had returned. And now it would demand to know what she had become. The gates of Winterfell groaned open, and the rider passed through without fanfare, cloaked in dust and silence. The guards stood aside without question. They had been told to expect someone dangerous, someone stark. Sansa stood waiting at the top of the courtyard steps, cloaked in black, ghost of the North hanging at her side. She did not move as the rider dismounted, nor did she flinch as the hood was pulled back. Arya, hair cropped short, a scar running from jaw to ear, eyes like sharpened stone. She looked nothing like the child Sansa remembered. She didn't smile. She didn't rush forward. She simply looked up at her sister with a soldier's stillness. "It's really you," Arya said. Her voice hadn't changed much, but there was something dead behind it. Something hollowed by years on the run, in the dark, wearing faces that weren't hers. Sansa descended the stairs slowly. "It is." They stood close now, inches apart. Two women carved by the same grief, shaped by different wars. Arya tilted her head. "You're colder than I remember." "And you're quieter," Sansa said. A beat passed. Then, without warning, Arya reached out and pulled her into a rough embrace. Sansa froze, just for a moment, then let it happen. Let her arms wrap around the only blood she had left who didn't want something from her. When they pulled back, there were no tears. No smiles, just understanding. "I heard about Ramsay," Arya said. "I saved him for you," Sansa replied. Arya nodded. "Then you know me well." The days that followed were strange. The castle adjusted to Arya's presence with unease. She walked like a shadow, ate little, slept less. At night, she practiced in the courtyard, dancing with blades as if fighting ghosts. Sansa watched her sometimes, from a window, from a distance. She wasn't the little sister who'd thrown snowballs in the godswood. She was a weapon. But Sansa no longer feared weapons. She learned to command them. One night, over a quiet supper in the great hall, Arya broke the silence. "You're building something here, something no one expected of you." Sansa looked up. They expected a prisoner, a pawn, a wife, Arya chewed slowly. "And what are you now?" Sansa didn't hesitate. "A reckoning," Arya smiled, small, sharp. "Good. You'll need to be more than that soon." Sansa's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Arya leaned forward. "The dead walk, Sansa. I've seen them. Jon wrote to you, didn't he?" Sansa nodded once. "He told me not to follow, and you obeyed." "I prepared." Arya tilted her head. "Good, because they're coming. And not just from the north." Sansa leaned back. "What do you mean?" Arya looked down at the meat on her plate. "Cersei's gathering forces. She wants the north weak. She doesn't believe in what Jon saw. She thinks the north is distracted with ghosts and snow. But she's forgotten something." Sansa's voice dropped. "We are not the south." Arya met her eyes. "No, we're wolves." That night Sansa stood at the window of her chambers, looking out at the snow-covered courtyard. She saw the future rushing toward her now, not slowly, but like a storm galloping across the horizon. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The dragons were coming. The dead were rising. The lioness still had claws. But the North had teeth now. Sansa gathered her council the next morning. Arya stood at her side, blade on her hip. "My brother rides with fire in the north," she said. "The south plots with poison in their wine. The dead march, and the living squabble like children over a throne made of swords." She looked at each of them in turn. "We will not beg. We will not bow. The north stands alone, or it does not stand at all." She drew her blade and held it high. "This is no longer my father's kingdom. This is ours, forged by betrayal, hardened by loss, ruled not by tradition but by fire-tested truth." One by one they knelt, not in submission, but in respect. And outside the walls, the winds howled louder. Winterfell had a new kind of queen now, Not one crowned by gold, but by ash, blood and ice. Sansa Stark, the Wolf of Winterfell, the Queen of Vengeance, the last flower of the North. And as the world spun toward its darkest hour, her name became a warning, whispered across castles, feared in courts. "Do not cross the North," they said, "for the quietest wolves bite deepest."